Hi folks, Dr. Ed Meyer. Today we're talking about Hashimoto's disease, and from a functional medicine perspective, what are the triggers that causes people to develop that have their immune system develop antibodies against Hashimoto's. Traditional medicine doesn't look for these things. Functional medicine, we do. So there are options to you if you know you have this or if you suspect that you have it, which over 70% of people with low functioning thyroid have Hashimoto, so it's very underdiagnosed. Let's do a little review. Okay, what happens in Hashimoto's is the immune system is forming antibodies. Antibodies are also known as immunoglobulins. They're the specialized protein that the immune system makes to tag something that it thinks doesn't belong in the body. So it's forming antibodies either to this enzyme called TPO in your thyroid, and or it's forming antibodies to this actually should be say protein right here, to a protein called TGB, which is thyroid globulin, which is the backbone of our thyroid hormone. So the immune system's forming antibodies to things that belong in the body. That's not right. That's what an autoimmune disease is, okay? It's losing tolerance to this. Now, there's this thing called molecular mimicry. You can Google this. This is some really cool research that they're doing now over the last 3 to 5 years. And what this means is the immune system forms antibodies to something in the body or something ingested that looks chemically to something they're already attacking. Let me rephrase that. So if your immune system's forming antibodies to the enzyme or the protein in your thyroid gland, there's a couple things, there's a microbe in our gut called Yersinia that looks very similar to the enzyme. So if your immune system's already forming antibodies to this enzyme, TPO, and then it sees this Yersinia, if the Yersinia overgrows, now that could trigger more antibodies against your thyroid. And because the two things look very similar, okay? And then there's also something that we commonly eat called gluten, which is a protein found in wheat, which also looks chemically similar to the TPO. So in other words, if we're already forming antibodies to this enzyme in our thyroid, which is what Hashimoto's is, and we have this microbe overgrowing in our gut, which I see a lot on our digestive stool testing, our DNA testing, then when this overgrows, it stimulates more attacks on the thyroid due to this thing called molecular mimicry. Same thing with gluten. If the gluten looks just like this enzyme, so if it's already forming antibodies to the enzyme, and then you eat gluten, every time you eat gluten, it's causing more attacks on the thyroid. So this is really neat stuff. We can identify this in our patients. We can test for it, and then we can remove them and eliminate two really big triggers to the autoimmune process in Hashimoto's. So an overgrowth of Yersinia, which again is a microbe in the gut, and if it overgrows, that can trigger Hashimoto's and autoimmune attacks. And gluten, which also chemically, it looks very similar to the enzyme, so through the process of molecular mimicry, this could trigger also autoimmune attacks against the thyroid. So how are we going to know this? We test. So, we don't just, some Hashimoto's patients have this, some don't. And how do we know? We have to do some really specific testing. The gut microbiome can be looked at through a test called GI Map by Diagnostic Solutions Laboratory. And then gluten sensitivity, there's various labs that we use for that. I'm Dr. Ed Meyer. I hope that helps. Have a great day.